my name is Cindy Beall, and I am honored to come to you through this video course. What an awesome opportunity to share and learn about all people's different stories and what God has shown each who are doing these videos. And so I'm in quite a lineup, and I find it quite an honor to be asked. My husband Chris and I have been married since 1993, so whenever you're watching this video, you can do the math. We have 3 sons between us, and now we have a daughter-in-law. And can I just tell you, this daughter-in-law thing is amazing. She's fantastic, and she smells so much better than they do. I'm a boy mom, so yes, I am so happy to have a girl in the family. Chris and I have been in full-time ministry for most of our marriage, and since 2002, we've been at Life.Church in Oklahoma under Craig and Amy Grochel's leadership. And we love it, and we're so honored that we get to serve at such a great church, and what a joy it is. So the other thing is, I'm a published author. I don't know if I mentioned that, but the first book I wrote came out in 2011. It's called Healing Your Marriage When Trust is Broken. And 5 years later, I did Rebuilding a Marriage Better Than New in 2016. So you may be wondering, if you don't know anything about my story, you may, well, why'd you write those books? Well, let me give you a little Reader's Digest of the behind the scenes kind of story that Chris and I walked through. Right after we came to Life.Church in 2002, my husband, literally 6 weeks on the job, sat me down one morning and confessed to me of his unfaithfulness. And it wasn't an office romance. He wasn't inappropriate with a friend. It stemmed from a pornography addiction, and then kind of just progressed and got worse and worse, and ended up in chat rooms and meeting people, and that's how he was unfaithful. So clearly I was crushed. You can imagine you guys are watching and you walk through betrayal, and it's just difficult to even think about how to overcome that. Well, if all of that wasn't enough, and that it was about a 2.5 year period, let me just say that this was all happening. It wasn't the entire 9 years of our marriage, but it was about a 2.5 year period. And so you think, gosh, Cindy, that's a lot to take. And that is a lot to take. But the worst part for me at the time was that he said one of the women was pregnant, and he was pretty sure he was the father. And just devastating blow after devastating blow. Now, fast forward, it's been 18 years at this taping, and God has redeemed our marriage. He has made us better than new. We are restored back into ministry after taking a short break. The child that was born is one of the greatest gifts in my life. And so God really is a miracle working God. And so I hope as you're sitting here today that you will understand that He is in the business of restoring people, and then He's in the business of restoring couples. And hopefully as we individually become restored by God's power, then we can make a difference in the world. So if you're listening to this video, chances are pretty strong you are familiar with pain. Now, pain is no respecter of persons. It doesn't care what you do for a living. It doesn't care how nice you are. It doesn't care how much you volunteer in your community. It doesn't care how good you are to your grandmother in a nursing home. It enters the scene of our lives when it's good and ready. Pain doesn't care who you are. It just happens. And so the most common question over these past years of ministry, writing books, speaking, meeting with couples, meeting with women, is when will the pain end? And on the other side of that, a lot of the people who are the betrayers would ask, Cindy, when are they going to get over it? And I used to get really mad at that second question. And now I understand that it's the betrayer's angle of how do I navigate that every time I look in my spouse's eyes, I see pain. How do I deal with that? Because what that does is it reminds this person of what they did. And so I understand there's pain on both sides. But I would just encourage you, pain, we don't want to get over pain. We want to face it head on, because even though it reminds us of what we did, it will hopefully keep us from making some of those same mistakes in the past. So in this short video, what I want to do is address that question of when does the pain end, or that kind of question. But I want to discuss the different stages of grief, and I want to discuss how to manage the pain. And so those two topics kind of go hand in hand: stages of grief, managing the pain. And so I'll kind of weave in and out of them because in my experience, that they just go together. So that's what we're going to talk about here. So let's first define what grief is. It is a sadness. It is a mental anguish. It is a deep sorrow. It is our natural and normal response to loss. What kind of loss? Any kind of loss. Could be the death of a person, could be the loss of a job, it could be loss of physical health, it could be when our spouse betrays us. So I want to give you a few nuggets today as we talk in this video, and I want you to be able to take these and then process them later, maybe with your spouse, obviously with your spouse, but maybe you have a trusted friend that you guys they're speaking into your life. Maybe it's a counselor that you're spending time with weekly or monthly. So whomever it is in your life that you can kind of walk through some things, make sure that it's someone who is for the marriage. It's not a friend, ladies, who is for you, and guys, it's not your buddy who is for you. It's a friend, it could be whomever it is, that is for the marriage, that is for both of you together. Does that make sense? So the first thing I want to tell you, I'm going to give you kind of three little thoughts here to take away. So the first thought is grief is a process. Okay, so grief is a process. There are different kinds of grief, but according to most experts, grief comes in stages. And so the most common stages that I found as I searched in a plethora of places were denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Now, we'll go through these stages of grief, but we may not go through all of these stages of grief. Does that make sense? Let me repeat that. We'll go through stages of grief, but we may not go through all the stages of grief. And we may not even go in the exact same order as someone else. We may go through one stage, we may move through it, think we're on the other side of it, and then we might even come back to it later because something has come up that took us back there. So there's no theory, there's no method, there's no one size fits all when it comes to the stages of grief. Just know that it is a process and they do come in stages. So let me give an example for me. So when Chris confessed everything to me, I moved right past denial, anger, bargaining, and I went straight into depression, 100% into depression. It was situational. I'm not typically struggling as a person. I don't struggle with depression, but when it comes to situations that are heartbreaking, I'll struggle. So I went straight to depression. Denial never really hit me because as he was confessing things to me, I began to think, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's what was happening. Because I knew in that 2.5-year period, things were not great. I just didn't know what it was. Okay. I never really, as I said, went through anger, but I did begin to bargain with God. Not that he would take away what my husband did, but that he would take away some of the consequences. So that's where my bargaining came in. And then eventually I did move to acceptance. So as I said just a second ago, the point isn't that we hit all these stages perfectly according to a nice little plan. And I love a good plan, but it's not that we're going to hit it perfectly, but that we understand that grief is a process. Your pain and your experiences are just that. They are yours. And so the thing about grief that you will experience when loss comes is that you never know how it's going to manifest itself. You just need to know that when you suffer a loss, grief will be involved, no matter how big or small your loss is. You can either work through that grief and heal through it, or you can keep living in your pain and circling the same loop over and over and over again. And you're trying and trying and trying to get around that pain. You're trying to get over that pain. You're trying to go under that pain, but you're on this continuous track like this if you do not learn how to deal with your pain and accept the grieving process. So the second part was, the stages of grief and identifying them. But the second part was, how do I manage my pain? And so I want to say there's two thoughts I have for that. The first way is the hardest way. Are you ready? Tell your spouse, I'm ready. Okay, good. The first way is that we push through our pain. I know you're really mad at me right now. Instead of trying to get over it, we actually address it. We address the pain. You've heard people say, well, I just want to get over it. And what they do is they're saying, I kind of want to get it out of my mind. I don't want to think about it anymore. And that's understandable. You maybe have said it. I've said it. And that's because pain hurts. But ignoring it or living in denial doesn't make it go away. It just doesn't make it go away. So what is it that typically causes pain to occur? Obviously, it could be some news we found out. But the biggest thing that I've found that keeps pain as this constant nagging friend that won't leave you alone is what I call triggers. Triggers. We hear a song that reminds us of where we were when we got the phone call. We see a movie where a wife is being unfaithful to her husband and the movie makers have glamorized it. We celebrate a birthday and we remember that our spouse wasn't at the last one because they were on a business trip doing that thing with that person. Or we simply wake up days after a confession or days after hearing the news and we have the immediate thought, oh, this is my life. This is not a dream. And so we get those triggers and they send us back into this deep abyss of pain and we cannot get out of it. And so our natural response when that trigger happens is to flee, right? I want to get over, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. We want to run as far away as possible. But if we don't address it, if we don't push through the pain, it will actually stay with us. How do we deal with it head on? Just like that. We go through it. We deal with it by facing it head on. I want to read a small excerpt from my second book, Rebuilding a Marriage Better Than New. And it's kind of my story of how I walked through dealing with triggers. And I pray that it encourages you that maybe it's not as awful as you thought. Okay, so let's listen. What do you do when those triggers sneak up on you like an unexpected earthquake in the middle of Oklahoma? Yeah, we have them. They will leave you spinning for a time until you can gain your composure and get you back on your feet again. You can't ignore them because they will keep coming. You can't just run from them because they will chase you. All you can do is just deal with them right there on the spot in the moment, even if it's in public. I was in Walmart and it was within the first 4 months of Chris's confession of infidelity. I was thrown into the past by something I saw on the shelf. It was an ingredient I had actually used to prepare a particular meal for Chris when we lived in Tennessee. A meal that he missed often because he had yet another ministry appointment. My heart sank as I remembered those hurtful times when Chris's double life was happening while I was raising our son. I lost my train of thought. I lost my point. While I was raising our son, while I was cooking the meals, while I was taking care of the home. While in Walmart, I could have ignored the trigger moment and acted like it didn't happen. I mean, I was in a grocery store with all kinds of people around me, but I didn't ignore it. I stepped into it. My heart literally ached. I bowed my head quietly, and I literally just started to cry over what was lost. Here's the thing. The tears didn't last long, just long enough to help me grieve this moment and push through the pain right in the middle of Walmart. It didn't matter that my husband was a new person in the current, in the present. The image that the trigger brings to mind does not reflect our actual reality. Things were going good with Chris, actually. We were healing and we were rebuilding our new marriage. But this trigger took me back to the past. And so when we chase the trigger and we go there in our minds, the memory, good or bad, is often exaggerated. The good memory is better, or the bad memory is worse than the actual reality. Nevertheless, this is typical of a trigger. So as we grieve our pain, as we push through our pain, we actually heal. It is a simultaneous action. We have so many hard days at the beginning of our loss, but as we heal, we find that maybe some of the days are not quite as hard. We start to make progress and we think, I'm getting over this. Or maybe you're thinking of your spouse, she's getting over this, or he's getting over this, but then there's something we see or something we hear, and it takes us back to when the pain was as thick as quicksand. And that is when the trigger happens. And they come with the territory of pain. So accept those triggers, grieve those triggers, and move on each day, a little bit at a time. A second way we process our pain is we reflect on our progress. That's right. You may not think you're healing because all you see is all of this junk around you, and you think, I've got a Mount Everest to get over and I don't know how I'll ever do it. But if you face your pain each day, if you deal with it each day, if you get the help you need each day, you are healing. You are healing. When we're in the thick of our pain, it feels like we're stuck, right? We don't feel things are different, and we certainly don't feel like we've made progress. Well, let me give you a little exercise to do. So I want you to picture your car. You've got a windshield that's pretty big, right? And then up here, you've got the rear view mirror. So when we drive, we are supposed to stay focused ahead. We stay focused on the windshield. We have a rear view mirror, and we actually have two side mirrors, and we can glance at that rear view mirror, and what it does is it kind of gauges where we are, right, in regard to other cars or other things happening, on the road. But we have to focus on the windshield. If I stare completely into my rear view mirror, my peripheral vision may help me a little bit, but I'm probably going to crash because I'm not going to see everything. So I look in the windshield, I glance at the rearview mirror. That is the way it is with where we are in life. You are trying to rebuild your marriage as you heal. Keep your focus forward. We're going forward. We're pushing forward. And in that forward progress, you're dealing with your pain. You're not ignoring it. You're dealing with it. You're pushing through it. But you're also saying, oh, let's look back. Wow, look how far we've come. So let's say it's been a month since you found out everything. And you think, wow, a month ago I couldn't get out of bed. But today we've gone to dinner with friends and I actually laughed. So the rear view mirror shows us the progress we've made. And when we see that progress, it encourages us to keep fighting and to keep going farther and farther and farther. And I believe that if you do this exercise every week, maybe more often if you need it, you'll actually see that you are healing and you are well on your way to a healed heart and hopefully a healed marriage. So notice I didn't say focus on your progress. We reflect. We reflect. If we focus on where we want to be, if we look so far where we want to be, sometimes that leads us to skip over pushing through our pain, And this doesn't mean we don't have goals to one day have it be at a better place. It just means that when we reflect over our progress, it actually gives us the strength to push through the pain to keep going forward. And I hope that you'll kind of remember these visuals that I've given you. So another question I get asked, I'm just going to throw this in here for extra, is how do you know when you're healing? Or how do you know when you're healed? Well, for me, I found that when the recovery time from a trigger continues to decrease or goes away altogether, you know that there's significant healing. Like I said, the first day you find out you're in bed, you can't get out of bed, you're crying all day, it's devastating, it's smothering you. And then as you move forward and maybe you see a trigger, it takes you an hour or two to recover instead of being in bed all day. Or maybe one day it only takes you 5 minutes to recover. Or maybe there's times where you don't get triggers for weeks or months on end. I'm at a place where when I am triggered, rarely does it even cause me pain. It really causes me to worship and thank God. I know some of you can't even imagine that, but I want to tell you, I dealt with my pain head on, and I allowed myself to go through that, and that's why I am where I am today. Not because I'm some amazing woman or my husband's some amazing man. It's because we dealt with it head on, we pushed through it, and God did a remarkable work in us. A significant part in our healing comes when we go from asking why to asking how. We no longer ask God, why did you let this happen? Instead, we say, God, how are you going to use this? God, why do you let this happen is a question we may never get an answer to. We may never understand how we were as good of a spouse as we thought to be, and we still got a spouse who was unfaithful to us. That question may never be answered. But God, how are you going to use this is a question that can not only change our lives, but other people's lives as well. Romans 8:28, one of my favorite all-time verses, the promise that we have, that we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. And so God uses all of these things to work together to do a remarkable work for his kingdom and in his people. When I would experience a trigger, I would push through the pain, I would cry, and then I would follow it up with this phrase, God, my life is yours, use it for your purposes. Every single time. And he did, and he has. All these years later, God has not only restored my marriage and made it better than new, he has not only given me an amazing relationship with a child I did not give birth to, and I didn't have to get stretch marks over him. He has not only redeemed the lost years that I had, but he has allowed me and my husband and our story to play a part in the lives of countless couples like you watching today. So I want you to take away 3 things today. Grief is a process. It's your pain. It's your experience. There's no one size fits all. The second thing is you've got to push through the pain. You're dealing with it. You've got to push through the pain. And the third thing is you've got to reflect on your progress. And I believe that as you push through the pain, you are managing that pain, and you are using these stages of grief to help you. It just all kind of works together. So what I want to say to you is don't be discouraged. I'm here to encourage you. You will get through this. God does not waste anything. If you don't have the courage right now to push through to make your marriage better than ever, allow my courage to encourage you. Allow God to transplant some of my courage into you, because I know the road ahead is difficult, but I want you to know it is not impossible. We serve a God who is the God of the impossible situation. He is good, he is faithful, and he never lets us down. He never forsakes us. He is always there, carrying us when we need to be carrying us, pushing us along when we need that extra push. He is never far. He is nearer than your very breath. I'd like to pray over you. Father, we thank you for what you're doing in the lives of your people. I thank you for sending Jesus. I thank you that you are a redeeming God. We love you, and I pray right now that the couples watching this today would be encouraged that you are working in them and that eventually you'll work through them. Father, we love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.